Yeah, but I'm excited to talk to you about critiques. So critiques are something that I use a lot in my life, both at work as well as in my own personal practice. So I do my own studio artwork as well as design work, and critique's an integral part of all of that. And of course, as an instructor, as a professor, I deal with critiquing student work all the time. Like every day, I think I'm dealing with critiques on multiple levels. And so it was interesting to have the opportunity to kind of think about critiques and what they are, and to be able to talk about them in a little bit more detail. So one thing that I thought of with critiques is that there's basically 4 different types of critiques. So the first type of critique deals with more technical aspects of the materials and the media that you're using. So if you are a new practitioner with a certain type of media, then you are probably seeking out help just to learn the media. If it's watercolor, if it's clay, if it's oil paint, whatever it is, you're needing some guidance and some advice to use the practice of that media. The second type, the formal aspects, is what Jen was talking about, and this is a big part of my life, is focusing on the composition and on the organization of the image plane, and using the elements and principles to do that. And so I won't get too bogged down in that now, we'll come back to it later. But it can be a really useful way to just analyze what is happening within an image, and to be able to control it more specifically with some experience under your belt. A third type of critique can be dealing with content, where you're really focused on the subject matter, you're focused on what you're trying to communicate with that artwork. And so it might be metaphorical, you're using some type of imagery as a way to symbolize something else. You know, it's what you as an artist are really trying to communicate with the artwork that you're creating, and using critique as a way to be more efficient with that. And the fourth type of critique is just a combination of those different types. And that's not unusual at all, to kind of dip in and out of these different types of critique as just part of the process of the critique. Critiques can be a really useful tool in making your art. You can use critiques internally as just part of your process, and it's something that I find really useful, and I think pretty much all artists, you know, are able to turn that part on or off. Internal critiques, it can kind of backfire. You want to be able to leave the editing part of your brain turned off while you're making, so that you can really focus and be creative on the artwork, and not be too hung up on, am I doing this right? Does this look right? You know, you want to be able to turn that off, but it's useful to be able to flip it on a little bit, just periodically as part of your process. Another way that you can use internal critiques is you can just spend some time with it and look at it. I think that's part of the process, is to step back from your work and then to spend some time where you're not actually touching it. I find with the longer form work that I do, I'm working on a series of paintings, and you know, there's dozens and dozens of hours in them, and I tend to do that when I come to that painting new. I'll spend the first few minutes and just spend some time with it. But it can also be just leaving it, being able to walk away from it for a while. It might be days, it might be longer than that, just as a way to kind of refresh your eyes so that you can see it new the next time that you work on it. You can also, one thing that I found just as a useful internal critique is to write about artwork, to write about what you're making. Every once in a while, and I really hate doing it, but it always ends up being useful, is to come up with an artist statement that relates to the work that you're making, and to just sit down and really kind of think about what you're trying to say with it. Can be kind of a way to focus on what you're doing, and so that you're kind of recentered in the work that you're making. So spending time with it while you're working on it, and just critically looking at it as part of your creative process, and then flipping back over so that you're actually engaged in making. Stepping aside and turning it to the wall for a little bit so that you can kind of get away from it and come back to it fresh, and then writing about it and spending time just thinking about what you're dealing with. Another way to deal with critique as part of your process is to seek someone out who can talk to you about your work. And so having that external voice that gets you even more out of your head, right? It could be someone that you know really well, someone within the guild or someone that you're friends with that's also a creative person, and have them look at your work. It can be useful to get someone fresh. With my design students specifically, I'll ask them to get their roommates to look at things, someone who's not actually an artist or a maker, just as a way to see what is actually being communicated to your visual audience. And so even though they might not have a deep experience in art, it can still be a really useful experience. So it can be a peer relationship. It can be someone who you feel is more advanced than you in some way, or it could be someone who has less experience. I think all those things can be really useful as part of an external critique process. One thing that's really useful with critique is to actually have it be part of your process, where it's not that you're always taking a finished work that's done and that you're not wanting to get back into, but take something where you've gotten stuck a little bit and get someone's kind of input on it, and see like what they can bring that will freshen your eye to it, and then be able to go back into it. So that for me can be a really useful process. I know that for myself, I've thought about like 3 different ways that I've used critiques just as part of my own art making process. And I do a lot of different things. I'm a painter, I'm a designer, I do a ton of drawing. Like those are the things that I'm really involved in right now, where I use a critique process. So if I'm doing a drawing and it's going to last maybe an hour, that process, I want to be in that flow state where I'm really observing and I'm really looking and invested in that. But I realized that I kind of step out of that a few times. And again, if this is like an hour, the first 5 minutes, I'm kind of setting up the drawing and measuring things out. And then I'll pause and just, how accurate did I get that? And then I'll work for another, 30 minutes or so, and just build that drawing. And then I'll kind of pause again. So I'm like a little past halfway with it, and step back and kind of look over the whole thing again. Where do I need to focus my attention and my time, and then get back into it. And then maybe 5 minutes before I stop, I'll pause and like look again and see where I need to finish things up. And so just as a real informal, like internal critique, that would be a process I'd use with something that I'm going to do in one session. If it's something longer, like a painting where I spend lots and lots of time, I might, I have my daily sort of check-ins with it, but I did this just a couple of weeks ago, where I took a series that I'm working on and I took it to work, and I had one of my colleagues look at it, and he hadn't seen any of that work, but he knows me really well, and I'm able to just kind of bounce things off with him, and he does the same to me. And it was really useful because he saw things in it that, he's like, these two are successful because you've got this kind of value contrast that's happening, and this one over here doesn't have that. And it's like, I hadn't even seen that. And so it was a really useful kind of thing for me. I was just trying to figure out, am I done with this? I don't really know, so you can, even with a deep experience, like it's still really useful to have that. As a designer, I build in time in my process so that I'm not finishing something and instantly having to send it off out into the world. I do better if I'm able to let it rest for overnight, at least, hopefully several hours at least before I send it out. So when I invest the time and I make the work, and then come back to it in the morning and make sure I'm still happy with the decisions that I made before I send it off to my editor or the client, or whoever is going to get that that work. So I use internal critiques a lot as well as external critiques. And like I said, it doesn't have to be at the end. It's useful to be able to incorporate that feedback. If not in that piece, then in your next pieces as you're moving forward as an artist, just to remember what was useful about that time. Critiques can also help you build a community. Art making can be pretty solitary, and so it's a way to reconnect with your community of artist peers. It's always really nice to know people who are creative and are doing kind of similar, or just understand where you're coming from, that they're doing creative work. It also can help you, it can help you get to know those people. It can help you know that you're communicating with your work, kind of where you're wanting to hit with it. You might find that a lot more comes out of the critique than just understanding your own work better, but you might find that there are collaborative partnerships that you could build within that critique community, or new ideas for work that you might want to make. So just, you might get inspired by someone else's process, or something that is said just sparks something in your mind that gets you excited about making a certain type of work. So that can be really, really useful. And this was something, I'm just going to put something in the chat. I had thought that there would be like an online space. I know I use Instagram as a way to share work. And then this Facebook group I'm in, which deals with faculty, like it's all art and design faculty. And someone posted about this creative critique community that I posted in the chat. I haven't used this, but it looked exactly like something that would be a really useful tool to engage in a critique situation virtually. And the really nice thing about that is, of course, you can get such a wide perspective of people that aren't in Montgomery, Alabama, as wonderful as it is here, and all these people are, you know, it could open you up to some fresh perspective. And there might be other communities as well out there. And like I said, I haven't vetted that and I haven't used it, but it looked like it could be a really useful tool. I do want to say that you know, there are some kind of warnings about critiques and using critiques as well. They can be really intimidating, especially for people who are new to them. Some people are not good actors in a critique situation. And I know that my experience in grad school, like there was often a harshness about some of the critiques, and it's not a space that I want to live in or be in. And so when I'm dealing with a critique situation in my university, I always tell my students that we're critiquing the work, we're not critiquing the people, and that we have a vocabulary that we're using so that we're able to defend the thoughts. You know, you are being critical of the work, and the goal of that criticism is to make it better and to make that artist stronger and able to better control their tools, you know, in making art. So that's my goal in a critique, but it's definitely not everyone's goal in it. And so, you know, if it's a competitive environment or someone's got just something on their shoulder or whatever, it can be kind of harsh. It is useful to have a little bit of a thick skin. People do communicate differently, and some people can communicate kind of brusquely, or it can pinch a little bit if it feels uncomfortable. But you do want to be as open and as not defensive when you're in a critique situation. You're gonna hear better if you're able to just kind of keep your mind open. And I know that I've had some critiques where it felt like a little uncomfortable and a little harsh, but part of it was either how the person was communicating, was that they were just really pretty straightforward, or that they were hitting on some truth that was really useful for me to hear. So it can sting, but it should be good for you. So yeah, being able to really listen will make them more useful to you. But also, if you don't feel like it's useful, if you know the person doesn't, you're just not gelling with it, you don't have to change anything that you're doing, you know. So the best thing you can do is listen and then take what you feel is applicable to you. So, all right, we've got some different models for critique too, and we can use these and kind of practice them on the work that was submitted today. One model could be that you just listen. You know, if you're seeking an external critique, that you just let someone talk and look at your work, and you're not prompting them and you're not trying to lead them anywhere, but you just kind of see where they go and what kind of associations they might have about your work. A second way could be that you come with some kind of intention, that there's something that you're stuck on or you're needing to fix, and you're seeking a resolution for that particular whatever it is. So it could be that you come to them with that question, like, how can I do X better? Or I'm trying to say Y and I don't feel like I'm getting there with this piece. A third way could be a formal analysis. And so that's focusing on the elements and principles. And this is one that I use a lot in class, partially because we're trying to learn the vocabulary and wanting everyone to be kind of on that same ground as they're going through the program. So we spend a lot of time with this. And let me go ahead and type in the chat here. So the elements are the rules. Excuse me, not the rules. The elements are the building blocks. And so I can't type and talk at the same time. Okay, so in the chat, you'll see here are elements. And you should be able to look at any artwork and identify these components in it. So line, shape or form. Shape is when you're dealing with a two-dimensional artwork. Form is going to be three-dimensional. So the difference between like a circle and a sphere would be the difference between shape and form. Color, if you're working with something achromatic like a black and white photograph, you won't have color, but otherwise you should see it in there. Value deals with lightness and darkness. So how light is hitting on something. If it's got content like subject matter in it. Texture, the texture could be real or it could be visual texture, like actual texture, the surface of something, or visual texture, like kind of the busyness of it or the smoothness of it. And then time and motion. And time and motion could deal with a static image the same way it could deal with something that is time-based, like a film. So if an artwork has, like one example that I use in class, if you know hokusai, like the wave, like that real famous Japanese woodblock print where it's got like the wave that's kind of curling around Mount Fuji. If you compare that image with going down to the Gulf and sitting on the beach and just looking at the water where it's all really flat, those have different types of motion in them, even though they're both static images. Does that make sense? Like what I'm saying with that? So these are our elements. Our principles are the rules that govern the use of the elements. And so go ahead and type these out. Okay, so here are our principles. I find it really useful to start with the principles and then kind of apply and see how the elements are used.
Sarah, you need to send that to us. I don't think you submitted it. I didn't see it come up in the chat window.
Okay, it says I sent it to everyone.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, I received
Okay,
it.
I see it now. Sorry.
The elements, it looks like.
I see it.
Okay. Yeah, so the principles are the rules that govern the elements and how they're kind of embodied within the artwork. So unity, variety. So unity would deal with the sameness, like there's same or similar colors or shapes or textures or those kind of things. Variety deals with difference, right? So you might have different shapes, different textures, just some kind of difference within it. Proportion and scale deals with the relative size of things, and that could include perspective, where you're trying to create the illusion of depth, and you need to really have your proportion and scale pretty nailed down. But it can apply to things that are non-objective as well. Balance, if something is symmetrically balanced or has asymmetric balance, it's going to create just a different feeling to it, different type of energy to it. Emphasis and focal point deals with the hierarchy of looking at an image, like what you're looking at first and then where you go from there. And then rhythm deals with like patterns that you'll see within artwork. So some kind of repetition. And you'll see if you look up like elements and principles, you might see different terms than these specific ones, but they all deal with the same basic concepts. And so one that I find really easy to start with is emphasis and focal point. If you can, when you're seeing an image, if you can just kind of like blur your eyes a little bit and like see it again for the first time, and just analyze like where your eye is going within that artwork, and then why it might be that your eye is going there, and then like where do you look next, and then where do you look next, and think about it in combination with these other terms. So for example, your eye is going to this place first because maybe there's a contrast in color, maybe the placement of it, maybe there's more like the value is contrast, you know, like it's in a lighter range of value in other areas of that image. And ask yourself if it's the most important thing that people are seeing it first. So is that where you want people to look within your artwork, and then you can just kind of analyze it around those. And we'll spend some more time with that. And another way to approach critique is through self-evaluation. A few weeks ago, I hosted Kelly Newsome. I know probably a handful of you might know her. She's a really fantastic painter. And she's an alumni of Troy, so we're always really happy to kind of get her back. But she led us on a workshop that dealt with creating a non-objective painting. And then about 2/3 of the way through the process, she had us do these 3 questions as part of a critique. And again, it was an in-process or a working critique. And then based on these answers, then we were able to kind of jump back in and finish that artwork. So the first question is, what do you love about your piece? Like, what about your artwork do you feel is really successful and you're really happy with kind of how you like created, you know, whatever it is, you're just really satisfied with that particular part. And so that's going to be an element that you're wanting to protect as you're finishing up the artwork. You want to preserve that part. What isn't working? Like, what area of your artwork is problematic? You're not happy with it. It's not successful according to what you were trying to do. Then obviously that's going to be an area that you're going to want to dive back into. And then the final question is, what type of process or mark making do you need more of in the piece? Does it need something, is it too energetic? You know, are you needing areas that are kind of calmer to sort of tamp that down? Or is it sort of static and you could use some energy with that mark making or that color, or, you know, whatever it is, what do you need more of in that piece? And then you've got a strategy of, when you go in to finish it, the areas that you're going to protect that are really pretty resolved, you don't need to do anything to, and the areas that have some problems, and then what you can do about that area to be able to finish it up. So I thought that was a really succinct way to do kind of a quick working critique that I found really useful. And so that's kind of what I had to share with you about critiques. And so we can take a look at those images. And if anyone has a question, we can talk about that. Any questions?
Sarah, I thought that everything you said was so useful and helpful. You know, I just was right there with you on every point that you said. And I just thought that from beginning to end, I could listen to what you just said multiple times and assess my own work or assess somebody else's work in all of those ways that you suggested. So thank you for your insight, and that was really, really wonderful to hear. I did have a couple of questions. You talked about turning the critique mode off and on.
Yeah.
Do you have any suggestions for that? You know, working quickly, I know, is probably one. You know, because you can't really do any thinking. You just have to work.
Oh, that's a good question. A lot of times when I'm really like in the zone and I'm working on something, I'll listen to podcasts, and you know, because I'm dealing with visual stuff, I don't really need the language part of my brain. And so if I'm focused on something like that, then I tend not to critique myself because I'm paying attention to what I'm listening to. So it might be that you can kind of switch it on and off based on some external thing like that. Or I might have an agenda, like I need to finish this section, or I've got this paint color, I'm going to use it until it's, you know, and I've got an area that I'm working in, and I'm just on autopilot for a little while. And then when I'm needing to make another choice, then I might sort of step back and look at it, or I need a drink of water, or stretch out or something like that. So I'll either tie it to something that I'm listening to, or I'll tie it to some physical movement that I need to make just to stretch out.
Thank you. That's great advice. I always tell my students to go do a load of laundry.
Yeah,
Just walk away.
Laundry's great for that. Yeah. Should we look at some artwork?
Sure, that would be great. Thank you.
Okay. I'm gonna see about sharing my screen. I made let's see. I actually don't do a ton of Zoom. Is there?
There should be a little green button down the bottom, Sarah, that says share screen. And when you click on that, then I'll give you permission.
Okay.
I think that's how it might work.
It's disabled screen sharing.
Okay, so let's see if I can get that straightened out.
I could also send you the PDF I made if you want.
Well, let's try this. So I just made you the host, so you should be able to share your screen.
I have so much power. Okay. Okay. Oh goodness. It's wanting me to like open preferences and stuff like that.
Sarah, if it's easier for you, you could email me the PDF and I could share my screen.
Okay. Let me see about just, I think I can do it through the chat area.
Okay.
Okay, it's kind of a big file. Everyone's getting it. It's in the chat. So it looked like it uploaded.
So far, nothing's come in.
Yeah, so it took a second to upload. If you'll give it maybe just another minute, and then it's a PDF that you can open.
So we each click on it. Is that right, Alyssa?
Yes, or I could always open the PDF if you need me to share the screen, Sarah.
I see mine is loading. I just wanted to be sure that was correct.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, if you could share the screen, I think that would be really great.
Okay, let me try that.
Can I make a comment while we're doing that?
Yes.
What I find fascinating about this is, I mean, what I listen to Sarah, you've got that three-tiered, your self critique, a critique basically of a non-peer, someone who is not involved in your same creative endeavor, and then a peer or mentor critique. That is applicable to any creative endeavor, and I find that fascinating. Writing, photography, music, whatever, that your own critique, then a critique from someone who's never seen your work, but is not a creative peer. And then that next level where you go to a mentor or a peer and get a critique. That I think that's a fascinating methodology that definitely going to use.
So Warren, I'm sorry, if you could make me the host, I'll be able to share my screen. Sorry, guys, thanks for your patience.
Well, thank you.
So it still says I'm disabled.
Sorry, I'm Sarah. I'm having a hard time claiming the host back.
No.
Let's see.
Well, I just made under security, allow participants to share screen.
Okay, let me try it again. There we go. Yes, I got it. Okay.
Awesome.
All right. So just let me know when you want me to click through. Can everybody see the image?
Yes.
Can you do like are you in preview?
That help?
Yeah, perfect.
Okay.
I think it's Command 2 might make it like full screen for that one image.
I'm sorry, say that again.
Command 2. I'm on a Mac, so you might be on a different, but just to
No,
make
Command 2. Okay. Did that help?
Yeah. So we could ask the person who made this, like what their intention is for this critique, like how they want us to proceed. Is there something specific they want to talk about with it, or just let us go with it, or?
Carol, would you care to ask Sarah?
Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Okay. I would just be appreciative of any input. I don't really have an agenda. Just anything. So I know that's not helpful.
What media are you using with this?
It's oil.
Oil? Okay. It's a really nice piece. One thing that I noticed looking at it, like I really noticed that darker fish. For me, that's kind of the emphasis and focal point, just because of the contrasting shape as well as the contrasting value with it. There's lots of like great diagonals, and I like how the fish that's in the middle, that's coming up from the bottom, like how it overlaps that darker fish a little bit, so it helps that dark fish not feel like it's just stuck on the top, which I think it could if you didn't have like that sort of overlapping part of it. One area that I get a little lost in, like if over on the far right hand side, you've got like a really narrow triangle, like there's a dark line that creates this really narrow gray triangle over on the right that comes up from the bottom. Do you see what I'm talking about?
Yeah.
On the far right. That area has some difference in the rest of the image. One area that helps kind of pull it back is on the extreme upper left-hand corner. There's a smaller triangle that has a darker area, and that part is really nice because it creates this mirroring. But that triangle on the right, to me, is like the most like problematic part of this image, because it's such a clean shape, and it's like a slightly different color, and it's smooth, and you've got all this texture in these other areas that when my eye goes over there, I get like a little stuck, and it's a little hard to get back out. But I think it's a really nice interesting image to spend some time looking around.
Thank you.
Yeah.
I think in the original, I mean, I think maybe for some reason, this image right here, the left-hand side is not as much, it's not showing as much. So I kind of, it's not the same shape or same size triangle, but it's kind of another one. And basically this is looking into a cooler. And so I'm just kind of playing with the shape of the side of the cooler on each side.
Got
If
it.
that makes sense.
Yeah, I moved. I was getting mosquito bit outside. Yeah, that makes sense.
So that being said, maybe I still need to do something with that
Not
right-handed.
necessarily. Yeah, not necessarily. If you were feeling pretty, sometimes it's, just a thing to keep in mind as you're going on to another painting. But it's a really nice painting. I love
you.
I love the color palette and like how muted it is, and everything's in that same sort of tonal family.
Mm-hmm. Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you for the comments.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks for sharing it. So whose painting is this or image? And what is your goal in looking at it?
It's mine, Catherine Cope.
Okay.
And as I was saying, when I submitted it, I started it over a year ago, and the energy that I had then, when I came back to it several months later, I kind of lost it.
Mm.
And just picked a place to start. And I started with the daffodils, and I could tell from the side, answered my question. I think they have too much chroma. I feel like they need to be knocked back again. But then I'm not certain what my focal point is. What I personally loved about the painting was what I see through the window. But that doesn't seem like that would be a focal point. I just really kind of don't know where to pick back up. I don't really I stopped on the faucet. I don't want those to stand out where one doesn't notice the environment around those things. So I don't know how to do that, how to back out of it.
Okay. What is your media? Like, what are you working with?
Oil.
Oil? Okay. I really one thing that I think works with it, and I agree, like the flowers have this real high saturation in the yellows, but it's not consistent with that. Like there's a lot of variation within them with different types of like, more yellow and less yellow and stuff like that. If they were all bright yellow, then yeah, that would probably be too much, but you've created a lot of variation by having those different flowers. One thing that is real subtle, but I think works really well.
You cut out just
on the left-hand side. Okay, sorry, I went to the back of my house. I don't have good internet back there. One thing that I think is really nice with your piece is in the left-hand window, you've got like some reflection or something. And there's that angle that comes back down. So it starts in the middle pane on the left-hand side, and then it angles back down.
That's right.
To the right, and that's really nice. It like hits the top of that faucet and sort of skims through those flowers. And I just think that's a really nice touch that helps you move between the top part of the painting and the bottom part.
Right.
I don't know. I could see this one being done.
Great. Well, all right, so the other thing that I was stuck on, those are copper
Mhm.
base holders. And I got really tentative. Number one, I was trying to come up with what are the colors in copper. And I got torn about how definitive should those be. If you zoom in, they're pretty sketchy right now. But yet I don't want to get too realistic. So what are your thoughts on those shapes? And
I think they're fine. I could see if you did anything on it. And again, it's like, how realistic do you want to go? Like the sink feels a little flat, you know, it doesn't feel like it really goes in. So I could see that you intensify and look at the value maybe in the sink if you're wanting it to feel
that's
more
good.
realistic.
It would put some depth, a movement, as you're saying.
Yeah, but it might make it kind of too contrasty because you know that light, like that center part of the sink is pretty light, and so it might draw too much attention if you really like emphasized the depth of the sink. So
I like your analysis. It's about done.
yeah, you can go make another painting. You know, there's like a blue quality to the base of the faucet, and you pick it up a little bit, like on the left-hand side between those two flowers, like there's a little blue area there.
Yeah.
I could see maybe moving that blue around really selectively.
Yes, that did bother me in trying to do that. And I think that was one of the things I was talking about with the chrome. I didn't want to make it too as definitive as the reflection actually was. And it hadn't occurred to me about that I need to have more of the blue worked in. I can do that.
Yeah, maybe make the blue a little weaker or something. Yeah.
Great. Thank you so much, Sarah.
Yeah, sure. Nice painting.
Thank you.
All right.
This is Carol Barksdale. I'm not sure she's here with us tonight. Carol, are you here? I don't see her here.
No, she's not here.
Okay.
Lisa.
If you would like to skip to another one, or if you wanted to briefly discuss.
Just really briefly, this is just to talk about like proportion and scale, like when you're dealing with something that is non-objective. Like she's got on the left-hand side, sort of that big white kind of soft rectangle that's behind things, and then like those smaller strokes that are on top of it that have some of them a similar hue and stuff. Like it's kind of fun to just look at. So there's a little tiny black square on the left-hand side, and then there's a bigger, softer, dark value square that's kind of in the center on the right-hand side. Like just kind of playing around with that formal analysis with proportion and scale can be fun to do on a piece like this. So that's all I'll say about it. So we can talk about something that someone else who's here has submitted.
This belongs to somebody here. I don't know if she wants to let everybody know.
I'm sorry, I had it on mute. I was talking, but I had muted myself. This is Joan. I painted this I made the photo black and white and changed the colors and did an analogous colors because this building really was like bright red and yellow. So I changed it, and the painting looks very cold to me. And so I tried to like put an opposite color on the color wheel in there somewhere, which just stood out like a sore thumb, and it didn't work. So I just, I guess my question is I don't know what my question is, but I wasn't happy with how cold it was. I feel like it needs some contrast in color.
Okay. And what's your media?
It's oil paint.
Okay, okay. Is there anything that you're really happy with in it?
What was I happy with? That's a good question. I guess I like the path going down and the shadows on the ground
Okay.
going into the distance. I think I was most unhappy with that big building there that didn't have enough interest in it. And then I thought, well, maybe the bikes have too sketchy, and so I was thinking, I don't know if to take the bikes out, or I don't know.
I was actually going to say I like the bikes the best.
Okay.
Yeah, I like the bikes too. One thing I would say with this is like maybe to get a little more detailed in a couple of areas. So, for example, the light post and the way that the fixture of it is at the top, and then what's happening like as you travel down that pole, I think is really successful because looking at the light fixture itself, like the left-hand side of it has this really crisp kind of edge to it, and then the right side of it is a little bit more watery looking or something. And it's really nice because it gives your eye like a place to kind of focus, and then it sort of dissolves a little bit, which is really nice. And you've got areas like that throughout your painting. And then the bikes, because they're so high contrast, it's like you really want to spend some time and look at them. You've got those whitish frames, and then you've got the darker shadows that are underneath them, but there's not like a real crisp sort of area to focus on in those. And I don't think it would need to be much. I don't think you need every bike to be like pristinely, drawn, but if you had some areas like in the handlebars, or which of those frames is in front of the other frame, like that kind of stuff, if you could just pull and be really specific about some little details, I think it would kind of help give you a place to focus on. One thing that someone said recently was to be specific in your generalities and general in your specificness, or something like that, which seemed kind of useful. But I think if I were jumping into this, I would probably pick the handlebar that's kind of the second one in, and just really work tight up against the part where it's joining the fork, and then maybe pick another little detail somewhere else in the bikes, and just kind of go around and tighten things up very selectively.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, thank you. That's good advice. And I think I know who said be specific about the generality. That's Alana Hagler. Was that?
Yeah, it
who said that?
Joan, I was curious what was in the windows.
It was a solid. There was nothing in the windows. They said they were bored. So that's why I said the building I don't think works. So
there's like a rainbow quality to that that's a little distracting, because it's like this kind of big square, and then the treatment of the color in that is different than a lot of other things that are happening.
So the color stands out too much there in that big square.
It's like the biggest area where you see that sort of pinkish violet. Yeah.
That's good to know. I could take that out. Thank you.
Yeah. I like that pathway too that you were talking about.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you for your help.
Yeah. So whose is this?
Hi, this is my piece.
Hey.
I really enjoyed how you broke down the classifications or different categories about critique. I really got a lot out of it. This is a quick plein air study that I've done. So I'm not seeking resolution. I won't touch this piece again. It's more of like something I have done for practice.
Yeah, that's great.
But I would love, I have really thick skin. I would love to hear a formal critique.
Okay. Um,
And one thing I did want to say quickly, sorry, was I found it really interesting that you commented on not designing the piece while you're creating, because I do feel like a lot of artists that have plein air instruction advises to design while you're creating, which I find incredibly difficult.
Yeah, I think it's useful to, like I said, I do a lot of drawing from life as well, and just work with what's in front of me, and I'll sort of kind of figure out the composition and then look at it before I, make sure my measurements are correct before I jump back in it. So it's like, I guess but I try not to do it while I'm drawing so much, whatever. So it's like you kind of flip back and forth between those modes. What is the scale of this piece?
It's very small, actually. It's 7 by 5.
Okay, yeah, that is really small. One part of it that is a little distracting to me is, first of all, I really love the greens and like how the greens vary, like from the top to the bottom in the background and in the foreground. There's some really nice colors that are in there. The back of like what I perceive to be like deeper space within this feels like pretty comfortable. And then what is coming into the foreground feels a little bit more like mushy or unresolved or something. So you see like in the foreground, in just like, again, similar to the bicycles, like just having a couple of things that come into focus. If it's grass, or if it's like, if there's just like a little something that is more in focus, where it would give your eye like a place to rest. For example, on the right hand side, about halfway, there's like a stem or like part of the bush that has like a crispness to it. Like there's this twig that's coming up and then it branches off twice to the left. To me, that is like is comfortable to look at. Like it's like I know what's going on. And the one to the left of that, it just sort of swerves, and it's a little harder to kind of find a place to land on that, if that makes sense.
Yes.
Yeah, so just looking for really small details that you can kind of nail and be really specific about them, and then your eye like really fills in the rest. I feel like you've got that part, like you're able to kind of deal with the space and think about the color, and it's all there. And if it was just another like 10 minutes of like looking for those little details, I think it would resolve that for me, if that makes sense.
It does. Thank you.
Yeah. Very cool. All right. Whose piece is this?
This is mine.
Hey,
and hey, this is again an experiment
Okay.
where I'm trying to make things more dimensional.
Okay.
And so this is actually encaustic. It's beeswax mixed with impasto wax, where I've got areas that really are very dimensional. You can't tell it maybe in this. And I've done several of these before, and others I've liked. This one I've just pretty much quit on.
Okay.
Because I kept feeling like it, first of all, it's too much of the same color, not enough variety.
Okay.
I think it did help when I put the little sticks in. I don't know if you can tell. That kind of helped your eye move along.
Okay.
I had fun with it.
Yeah.
For sure. Because I love trying these new things with encaustic, making them more dimensional. But the ones I've done before, I've had other pieces that went with it that helped explain sort of, or, you know, it gave you a little more meaning.
Okay.
Like other smaller pieces that sat beside it or above it. And I kept playing around with doing that with this one, but they didn't work out. So, you know, I think the wisest thing is just to quit, but I'd love your feedback on it. So
When you're talking about the sticks, I think you talking set my Alexa off.
really,
Technology's so weird. Yeah. Good grief. Let me mute just a second and I'll. Sorry, that was the craziest thing. Yeah, you got my radio started.
oh, really? Okay.
When you were talking about the sticks, is that the tan parts that are kind of going around that cross?
Yeah, those are actually wood that's embedded.
Okay.
In other words, I glue that, most of that I've glued down before I even start the pouring process.
Okay.
So I glued those things down, and there's all sorts of stuff in it. But anyway, and then the last thing I did was I took more of these little wooden sticks and I put them around on the right-hand side and the left-hand side around the circular parts to try to pull it together more. So you wouldn't see just the big cross-like shape so much.
Yeah, that cross-like shape is just going to be really dominant because it's the only thing like that, you know.
Right.
Like you've done with the circular form, like around that cross and then to the upper left and to the lower right, like you've kind of repeated that circular form.
Right.
And you've repeated that grid, the perpendicular grid that's going on in the lower parts, like. But the cross is like, it's got this angle and
right. Prominent.
Yeah, and then also like the sticks go all the way around it. I can see that if you pulled parts of them out, like it would be a way that you could kind of break up that shape a little bit.
Oh, that's a good idea. I hadn't thought of that. And I could cut some of them out. I mean, it's possible to do that.
Yeah, and then you said that the green you weren't real happy with.
Well, I did this particular image doesn't show it. I do have more variation in the actual work.
Okay.
So there are more variations in the green, and I guess I can't get away from the green because part of what I'm suggesting is a symbolic archaeological dig from an aerial view.
I can see that. And
I can't make my mind go away from it to make it more abstract, which is crazy. I mean,
yeah.
That's why I got stuck on it, I think.
Yeah, I could see like finding ways to break up that cross shape or to pick up diagonals in other places. The sort of circular form that goes around that is really powerful. Basically, it's like you've got this X that's right in the middle of your piece, and then you've got a circle around it. And so your eye just really gets locked into that, and it's hard to get out. And you're doing some stuff to sort of, you know, like I said, repeating those circular forms, I think is a really good impulse, and kind of repeating those like kind of the small square components.
Yeah.
But the ones inside the cross are set at a diagonal that matches the cross, and then the other ones are set at a perpendicular to match the grid and then the overall kind of format of it. So it would be like, what can you do to make that cross like less dominant, or to pull kind of similar things elsewhere in your piece? Make that circle kind of less dominant. Like there are areas where it's sort of flush with the surface and areas where it gets pushed down more and stuff like that.
Oh, that's good. Yeah. Well, I may work on it some more.
Yeah.
maybe I will.
It looks like it has a really great texture.
It does, and as I said, it was fun to, I've really enjoyed doing these, burying some things and covering them, and
Yeah.
and then bringing them back out, and yeah.
You know, and sometimes it's like you can find something out about what you're trying to do in a piece and the piece itself you might not be super happy with or want to show, but like going through it was really useful and kind of helps you move forward with something else.
Yeah, that's great.
Yeah.
Thanks. That helps a lot.
Yeah, thanks for sharing it. Cool. So, is this a Bob Corley piece?
Why, sure.
Yeah. Is it?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, it is.
I've seen a couple of your pieces before, and I was like, I think I know.
Oh, yeah. Okay. Can't fool you.
So what's your goal? Like, what would you like to talk about with this?
Well, any and all reaction. I mean, I've got my own critique that got me to this point. And a little bit of viewer critique when I had it down at the Johnson Center back in November, December.
Yeah.
Comments about it and from non-artists. So really probably a peer or mentor critique, something tough. I can take it.
You take it. So I think this is my designer side. Like, I just want to rotate this like 1 or 2 degrees so that the top of this window is parallel with the top of the image, like seeing just like that little tiny bit of red of that sign or whatever is making me a little crazy. Like,
okay.
But this is like the designer part of me. Like, I really, the sidewalk or whatever is happening in the lower left and like how it's roughly parallel, to the bottom, like that's working. It's just like, I just want to sort of twist things a little bit.
Yeah. Okay. It's good. That's an interesting comment.
Yeah.
These are all original photograph, and I could, within the program, develop more of the letters, because once I rotate a little bit and straighten it up, I'd need to have the other letters, and that's probably doable. Yeah,
I think the red up there works. Like, I think that part is helpful because the red picks up with the sweater or whatever's in the window, and then also with that umbrella that's on the right hand side. And then so I think having some red up there is really useful. Another thing that's kind of weird is like the person with the sort of fuchsia umbrella and like the blue sweater. I don't know if it's resolution on my screen. I can't figure out where their legs are. Like, everyone else.
One of them, she's got a shoe peeking out from the orange umbrella.
Got it. Okay.
And then the other leg is the V that goes behind the purple one. But yeah.
Okay. Yeah, that makes sense. Yeah, I like were you working with the colors that were there, or were you like
originally I wanted to stay true to the colors, but no. Okay. The umbrellas you're not going to get, and this is actually a 3rd floor apartment in France a couple of years ago. Nobody cares. Very few people carry those kind of colorful umbrellas anymore. Most of them are black or gray, or with some sort of pattern. Yeah. So no, that is strictly an invention.
Okay, cool. I like what you're doing. Like the person in the far left, the front person with the green, and then how the green is picked up on the right hand side with the person in the back, and then the red of that umbrella, and how there's like kind of red edges around the person in the front, like kind of reddish boots and stuff like that. I really like that detail and the way that the light works on the umbrellas. The umbrella in the back, the red one feels kind of flat. And again, I'm looking on screen. I don't have particularly great resolution with it, so I know I'm missing out on some details and stuff. But one thing I kind of wonder about is you see, even at the resolution I do have, like you can see all the details in the coat, like the guy in the middle that has that sort of blue puffer jacket. And then the umbrellas feel really flat and in some ways. So I'm wondering if like the ribbing or something.
Yeah, I can see that. That could have been enhanced.
Yeah, but I really like the organization of it, like how there's a sort of swoop of motion, like from the top right, and how the sidewalk kind of follows. And there's enough going on that far right hand side that it's still really interesting, even though it's all sort of grays and stuff. It's cool. So,
Well, thank you.
yeah.
So Sarah, I think we have time for maybe one more. We're going to try to do an hour tonight, just so that everybody would kind of have time to get back to dinner or whatnot. So we have one more. Would that be okay?
Sure.
Okay.
Yeah, I love this piece. Whose piece is this?
It's mine. This is Warren.
Okay. So it's a photo. Yeah, it's really beautiful.
It's I'm roaming through some parking garages downtown, and I'm stumbling across little streaks on the walls or cracks that can be in the floor, with the idea that of things that look like landscapes. This is totally experimental for me. Then I'm coming home and in the digital darkroom working to colorize them, paint on them a little bit using the tools in Photoshop.
Okay.
I think the thing for me that thrills me the most about this is, from my perspective, is that it does look like a landscape, and it does look like a waterfall, and I just adored the texture. There wasn't a lot of, I didn't fiddle with any of the texture that was all originally there. What I played with was the push and pull of what's in the foreground from the edge of that line that comes across the upper portion of that, and then that piece that's in the background. I tried to lighten that and darken this in the foreground a little bit to create this sense of depth.
Yeah, it's really nice. Like I don't know that I've got kind of thoughts about how to make it look more like a landscape. I think I'm just enjoying sort of how the shapes are working. And there's just all these really cool areas to look within this. Like my eye definitely goes to the top of that waterfall and sort of that line that's coming down, and is there's some more geometric stuff that's happening above that line, and then more organic stuff that's happening below it. And I need to move to plug in my computer. The blackish area on the left-hand side at the bottom, and that sort of real thin wedge shape that's coming up, is mirrored in some really cool ways with the kind of the waterfall type shape that's coming in the center. And that little black chunk that's in the very top right, I think, is a nice sort of counterbalance to the darker area that's on the left. There's some, in the lower right-hand side, there are some lines that are kind of at a diagonal. They're less interesting. You know, it's like they kind of break up that corner, and there's little vertical bits that sort of reflect back into the waterfall part. don't know. I think this one's kind of good as it is.
Thank you.
Yeah.
It's been a lot of fun to poke around in those garages to see what surprises I can find. Thank you, Sarah. I would just like to say that your presentation was fabulous on all the critiques. It's like, wow, I'm so glad we did this. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. It was useful.
I think we're losing you a little bit, the bandwidth, but thank you very, very much. And thank you all who came on tonight.
Thank y'all. This was a terrific presentation.
Well, thank you.
And we're going to try and do these kinds of talks again. We'll find other topics. We'll send out notices to everybody. And everybody should look, if anybody has submitted work to the Montgomery Art Guild's museum exhibit, the results from the judging should be out shortly, sometime in the next week or so. And then in May on the 21st, there'll be a virtual reception, and we'll send out lots of notices to everybody to let them know about that, because the museum has decided not to do any kind of in-person meetings, receptions. Anything else, Joan or Elisa? Or
No,
Sunny?
just thank you very much to Sarah. Really appreciate your
Yes.
time. It was fantastic the way you broke it down, and so much to think about, and we'll have to do some internal critiquing. Thank you.
But just, you mentioned that they're not going to have any receptions. Is the work still going to be hung at the museum? Or is that going to be virtual?
No, the work will be hung at the museum for sure. It'll be up all summer, definitely. And we're going to do probably a web gallery of the work as well for those that can't get out. So just look for that information in the future. But if anybody here is not a member of the Montgomery Art Guild and you like what you're seeing, if you would like to support us, you can go to our website at www.montgomeryartguild.org, and there you can apply for a membership, and it's $50 for a year, $25 for students. And we just appreciate everybody that showed up here tonight. It just shows that what we're doing is interesting. And if anybody has any suggestions on topics that you would like to hear more about, please feel free to send those to our email at artguildmontgomery@gmail.com. And Joan and Sunny will take those suggestions and design our next art talk.
Yep.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone.
Okay. Thank you all. And Sarah, thank you so much.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Good night, everybody.
Good night.
Good night.